Okay, 6:05. We should get started. Okay. So, I just want to remind everyone also that officer application closes today. So, if any one of you are interested in being a SCAC officer in the future, you should totally apply right now at the second so you don't miss the deadline because it closes today. And we have a couple of announcements that I'd like to make before we jump into the whole meeting subject. The first one is that we will be at Mini Comics Expo will be held in Adler Hall. This is an annual expo or an annual event hosted by the SCAD's Department of Sequential Art, and it's going to be on November 9 at 10 a.m. I think they're going to have like a bunch. They're going to have like guests as well, and a lot of people will be tabling. So if you don't come for SCAD Concept Art Club, come for the events because I feel like it's something really worth it for you to check out. Our second announcement is that SCAD Concept Art Club is releasing our first ever Monty zine, our fall 2024 edition. And so there will be further updates on how we will distribute the zine or when we will distribute it, but just stay tuned and check out our announcements channel in our Discord and our Instagram because we will be telling you guys how to access that. And our final announcements, it's that we have confirmed that our end of quarter prize contest which will be next Friday. It will be held in Neighborhood Comics, which is near Arnold Hall. And I think if you Google it, they should give you the address, so it's not really that confusing to find. And speaking of that end of quarter prize contest, it will be on Friday, November 9 at 6 to 8 p.m. at Neighborhood Comics. But because of its limited space, because it's not as spacious, it is a comic book store and a comic book place. So we will only have space for 30 people to be in that contest. So contest participants will have to sign up to attend, and it will be a first come first serve what's it called, sign up. So be quick if you really want to attend the contest. And we will publish or announce the link in our announcements and our Instagram soon. So just stay tuned for that too. Anyway, let's just start the meeting then. Yay! Don't forget to fill the attendance form once again. Okay, anyway. A little disclaimer before I start. I am not an absolute expert at Photoshop. I don't know what every single button does. I don't know what every shortcut is. But what I am is that I do have experience in using it for 5 years. So I feel like I will be okay in explaining the basic stuff that you need to do to use Photoshop for your concept art. But yeah, just a disclaimer, not complete expert. I know some of my friends who are better at this than I do. But yeah, I've been using it for 5 years. So yippee. Anyway, so a little bit about Adobe Photoshop before we jump in is that Adobe Photoshop is a raster graphics editor, and it is developed and published by Adobe for Windows and Mac. It was created in 1987 by Thomas and John Knoll, and the difference is that Adobe Photoshop is raster. Adobe Illustrator is a vector-based graphics editor. You don't really need to know what that means. I feel like I just thought I would say it in case you do know what it means. So, and a lot of questions that I get is that why is Adobe Photoshop industry standard, or why is it considered something that is important for you to learn? And the reason why it's industry standard is actually I found out that it's less because of the drawing side, and it's more of the licensing contracts and stuff that companies are able to use easier using Adobe Photoshop. And it is also a better integration with other Adobe apps because, as you know, Adobe has a lot of other applications like After Effects, Premiere Pro, Illustrator, Fresco, Design, and every other application. So using an Adobe application to draw in a company or in a workflow, it will help companies and the whole pipeline work better. It also has a cloud system if you don't pirate it. If you actually pay for it, you have a cloud system where you can put all your files, and so you can really access it anywhere. And it's also very versatile and precise. It is one of my favorites about why I use Adobe Photoshop. It is an application that lets you do a lot of stuff. And a little fun fact, it was actually not created for illustration. It was like the name it was used to edit photos. That's why it's called Photoshop. But because I feel like back then you don't really have a lot of choices, and so people went to Adobe Photoshop to use it as drawing. And how does it compare to other drawing applications? Whenever people ask like, okay, so is Photoshop better than Procreate or is Photoshop better than Clip Studio? I don't think it technically is. I think it has its pros and cons. I feel like if you're better at drawing in Clip Studio, then by all means use Clip Studio. If you're better at drawing Procreate, then there's no mistake in using Procreate. But the thing is, it is still quote unquote claimed as industry standard. So I still always at the end of the day, I will say it is good to learn it and have it under your belt because it is like it's very good for integration and stuff like that. But I also want you to think about more of what you're using it for. So Clip Studio Paint might actually be better for making scroll comics, which I know a lot of sequential art students are using it for. It has a lot of assets, a lot of it has those 3D models too that you can quickly put into your workspace to base off. And Procreate is better because it's also very convenient. You can have it on an iPad and it has time lapse features and stuff like that. So just think about what you're using it for. And these are some examples on industry professional artists that use Photoshop. And a lot of times I find a commonality in all of the artists is that they don't just use Photoshop. They usually integrate it with other applications or softwares, usually a 3D software like Maya. They use it and then they paint over it with Photoshop. Like Martin, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Martin, he uses Procreate for a sketch and then he uses Photoshop. And the other stuff, Didier Connings as the concept artist, one of the concept artists for Planet of the Apes. Jeremy Love was the concept artist for Avatar and also Shang-Chi. And we all know who Irie Pan is. Irie Pan uses Photoshop and Clip Studio. So you see how it's good to have skills in a various bunch of other drawing softwares and drawing applications just so you can use the best features of the applications for whatever pipeline of your drawing you're doing. And so we enter the most weighted part, I think. So if any of you are here who has no idea what Photoshop looks like, you've never touched Photoshop before, I'm going to tell you the most basic stuff that you need because I know opening it is probably very intimidating. It's how I feel when I first opened it at high school. I was like, oh my God, there's so many buttons. And because it is a very multifaceted application, you can use it practically for anything. And so they have everything. But basically, what you need to know, the parts that are highlighted in blue is called the toolbar. That's basically where you can find all of the stuff that you need for you to actually draw your piece. The parts in the red box is called the menu. The menu is just stuff, and it will let you. So if you ever need to like save your file or change the size of your canvas, that's where you go to the menu file. There are different parts of the menu, but I feel like if you explore or like just click through them, it slowly starts to get very intuitive. Like you will go to file if you want to save, or if you want to change anything of your file settings, you will go to file. If you want to copy, paste, and basically quote unquote edit, you will go to edit. So it's actually a lot more simple. I promise you guys, it is not as intimidating as it is. It is very like once you use it, you're like, oh my God, that makes sense. So the green one is where is your tool menu. So basically, if you click on a tool in the toolbar, like you click on a brush, you will see options for that brush on the green section. So that's where you want to keep your eyes on. And the yellow part is where I feel like a lot of people like to customize their workspace in the yellow part. It's called the panel groups. And so usually when you see an artist work on their artwork and they share their Photoshop workspace, this is the part where like with every artist it's like different. So that's the thing too with Photoshop. There's no really how do I set up my workspace. You literally can set up your workspace any type of way that you want as long as it works best for you. Then there's literally no right or wrong. All you need to do is that you just need to understand what it does, and so you just feel free to do whatever you want with it. And for all the important parts like layers is found in the yellow section. And if you look downwards and you see like all those little buttons in the layer that in my layers panel that I have, that is where you can make a folder. You can create a layer down there, like a little box with a plus sign. That's where you can create a layer. The trash can is also right there. So if you want to delete anything, whether it's a layer, a folder, that's where you delete it. And the layer settings is you have to click on a layer. So if anyone of you is familiar with Procreate, maybe you know what layer settings are, and that's where you find your layer settings. But I will show it to you immediately when I do a little demo later at the end. But basically, some other stuff that you need to know when you jump to Photoshop is just file stuff. It's not technically something that's just exclusive to Photoshop. I feel like it's something that it's good for you to know. So work in RGB and not CMYK. So the difference is RGB is good for computer viewing, which is usually what people will do if you're in concept art. You will do art books, but that's like a later thing. Work in RGB because people are going to look at it on a screen. Unless you're 100% sure that you are going to print it, then work in CMYK. Sizes. Keep it at 300 dpi. And I will go through how to go about creating your file later on as well. And basically, just don't go under 300 dpi if you can. But if your laptop is dying like mine, you can go at 150, but just don't go lower than that. I don't really advise it. And if you can, don't go under through 2000 pixels as well. For artboards, you can utilize artboards. I will also show you how to use artboards. But basically, a question I ask is why do you use artboards? The one reason why I use artboards is basically because it helps with workflow, especially because if I have like, okay, I'm working on a project, the project involves like 3 illustrations, but it's the same series. I usually just want it to be convenient in a way where everything is in one workspace. So I will use artboards because that way I don't have to switch over files to look at the piece, and instead it's just like conveniently in one row. But the most essential parts, basically, out of everything that I just said, is these 4 things that I feel like if you know how to use these, you literally can make anything, and everything else is just an add-on to how you elevate your piece. So the most essentials is obviously the brush tool and the eraser and the lasso tool. This is all found in the toolbar in the green box that I showed before. The shortcut is very obvious as well. Brush is B, eraser is E, lasso is L. So if you ever want to switch over to any of them and you don't feel like dragging your mouse all the way to the left side of your screen, just click B or E or L. And another shortcut that I would like to tell you that I didn't write here, but it's good for you to know, is you click Z for zoom. So just click zoom and then you can move your pen or move your mouse and it will zoom in and zoom out for you. And the space bar is for you to move around your workspace. And another one that I think is really essential is the adjustments layer. And this ties into the little quote unquote Photoshop trick that I will tell you at the end, because I promised that I will in the meeting description that could elevate your piece. And I will elaborate on this further later. But if you forget everything, just remember this. I even made an acronym for it. It's called VMCAL. It makes no sense, but we like acronyms because it helps. B is for brush, eraser, alpha lock, masking, clipping, adjustment, and lasso. I will show you what alpha lock means and what masking and clipping means later on, but basically all those 3, alpha lock, masking, and clipping, is going to really help you in going through your illustration without it being destructive. What I mean by destructive is if you erase something directly, and you keep working on it, you can't really undo it. But if you use masking, you can freely just be indecisive and not have it destructive. But anyway, what's up with adjustment layers? Why is it important? Because I know some people probably think, okay, brush eraser, that makes sense, but why is adjustment layers important? This is a little thing that I would like to show people that I feel like a lot of people can benefit from, but it just never occurred in their head that they could do. So adjustment layers is how I use it. It allows me to composite my artwork. And it basically puts my artwork through a quote unquote post-production process that really elevates it in such a short amount of time, and it gives you so much flexibility. Also, I'm kind of embarrassed that I put my artwork in there. It's like an old artwork, so don't mind if it looks a bit funky, but it's there for the sake of example. So basically, adjustment layers allow you to take your finished render and then you can elevate it. So like the picture that I showed you in the screen, like, okay, that looks okay. But then once I put a bunch of adjustment layers with it, it can look like the after piece, which I feel like is something that I wanted to look more of. Like it's the direction that I'm going. It helps with, like you can see, it has more focal point. It has more focus. It has more. It's more dynamic. The lighting's more dynamic and stuff like that. And one thing that I would like to say to everyone is that post production or doing this step is not cheating. It is not cheating. If you use all the tools that you have, then why is it cheating? You know, at the end of the day, you use Photoshop or you make your art piece so you can get the visual direction that you want it to go. And you have a certain quality that you need it to go to as a concept artist. So why not use adjustment layers to make sure that your idea is going through and it's like translating to the people that are looking at it. And these are some of the other artworks that I put it through post with adjustment layers. So I know it's not going to be really clear because I put it side to side, but later on, once I open my Photoshop, you can see how different it is that I put adjustment layers on it. So there's the before and then there's the after. And yeah, okay, so I'll go tell you guys, I'll show you guys what I mean. Okay, hold on. Let me switch over to Photoshop. Okay, any questions so far? Let me actually look at the voice text. Okay. Hold on. Yay, can everyone see my thing? Okay, I can. You can. Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you. Okay, so this is the first before. That is without post. That is after. Like if you see it side by side, it's not noticeable, but if you switch it on and off, like oh my gosh, you know. And this is the second example. It's also without post after adjusting it. It's so simple, but it's so nice. Okay. And I will show you guys how to create your new file for all of those that really has not touched Photoshop. Because I know in my first year, I talked to a bunch of people and they were like, I've never touched Photoshop, so I'm showing it to you. It's simple, guys, I promise. So basically, okay, I'm gonna repeat that actually. If you open your Photoshop, you go to File, press New. It's not showing my screen, is it? That's horrible. Hold on. Okay. Actually, wait, let me Windows, just so like the Photoshop is showing, but the pop-up is not showing. So just there you go. There you go. It shows now. Nice. Photo file, press new, and this is basically where everything starts. You can create your own kind of canvas over in this side, or you can have presets. There's a bunch of them here. If you know you're gonna print your stuff, there's a preset for like an A4 paper, ladder paper. And then for arts and illustration, I don't really use this. You just go to print or film and video. But I would advise to stay away from film and video because I used the presets in film and video before, and it kind of has this weird pixel correction thing that happens where if you turn it off, it kind of stretches your everything. So try to stay away from that if you don't really understand what you're doing. Stay in the print section, or you can make your own, which I will do right now. So for pixels, like I said before, you can kind of make your own. Like I said, don't go under 200, 2000, but for my case, I'm already breaking my own rule. I'm having it in 1743, but that's okay. Just don't go like under 1500, I guess. Resolution 300, color mode RGB. If it's in CMYK, just click it, change it to RGB. And you don't have to touch anything over here, 8-bit. Sometimes it's at 8-bit, sometimes at 16-bit. It won't really matter. Unless I'm wrong, someone correct me again. So make sure it's also in working RGB in color profile. And then just name it something that you want to. In my case, I don't really know what I want to name it, so I'm going to keep it in Untitled 1. and press create. And you have your own little canvas. That's so nice. Yay! Anyway, so again, this is where you have all your stuff. You can copy and paste, but I always advise to just use the shortcut Control-C, Control-V. I feel like everyone knows that already. And this is where you can find adjustments, image size, canvas size. So if you ever want to resize your canvas, go to canvas size. But if you've drawn something on your canvas and you just want to make it larger, go to image size. For example, let's see. If I draw something really stupid right now, like that. Yay, right? And I'm gonna change the canvas size. Let's say it, like, I make it absolutely dramatic, like 500 pixels. It will clip literally everything. But if you use image size instead, you need to lock it, by the way, to make this work. You go to 500, click OK, and it will automatically be small, but your drawing goes with it. So just keep that in mind. Like, you've drawn something, you're like, oh my god, it's at the wrong size. Just change it to image size. You don't have to redraw and resize everything by hand. But anyway, if you want to create your layers, it's right over here, the square with a plus. If you want to group something, just select layers that you want to group and click. So you've got that in there. And where you want to access your adjustment layers is at the bottom. So that's also near the where you can make new layers and throw away your stuff in the trash can. Make your groups. There is this little round thing that's separated in the middle. That's where you get all your adjustment stuff. So if I click it, it's quote unquote adjustment layers. There's solid color, gradient, pattern, etc., etc., etc. I usually use the two boxes in the middle is what I usually use because it can increase brightness, contrast. There's options for editing your hue and saturation. There's an option for color balance, which is something that you want to use. For basic color grading, you can have color lookup or gradient map or selective color and all these other stuff for even more advanced color grading. But we won't go there because that's gonna confusing because I also sometimes I'm like, wait, what? So we won't go there. But anyway, we're gonna go to learning how to composite your artwork now. So if anyone wants to go along, feel free to do that. You can grab your own artwork and open Photoshop, put your artwork in it, and then we'll see how it goes. So I'm gonna use this. It's actually an unfinished piece, so please be kind in the comments. It's not done yet. I'm rendering it, I promise. But this is my project for an animation class I'm in right now. And I'm gonna show you an example of how I would go about elevating or compositing or putting my piece through post-production with Photoshop, especially adjustment layers. So what I would do is I make a new folder and I name it something like effects or post or compositing, but in this case, I'll just name it post. Just so you guys can see it more clearly, I'll color it red. And so in post, what I would do is something simple that I always do to elevate my art piece is put a how do I say the word, Catherine? Vignette. Vignette. I always put a vignette on it. So how do you put a vignette is basically you go to the adjustment layers I just told you about, click brightness and contrast, and usually I just decrease it and increase the contrast a bit. And then the thing beside here, this white square, that's called a masking layer. That's gonna be what I just said as your non-destructive way of editing. And basically what it does is that it allows you to decide where you want effect to take effect. So basically white means that the edited brightness, it will apply everywhere. But once it turns black, like let me take a brush, just click on the masking layer, take your brush and make sure to put it on a black color. And then if you go over it with black, that deselects the part where you don't want it to take effect. So what I would usually do is I take a soft brush, just a regular soft brush, and I would usually paint the entire middle part black, just so the ones that are darker are on the sides. And so what that does is that it very subtly helps helps you make your viewers look at the the objects that are in the middle, because that's usually where your focal point is. It's in the middle. So just that those dark corners help the viewers just slightly lift their eyes up to where you want it to be. So that's what I usually do. It's something like if I'm confused, like, oh my gosh, this looks horrible. I just slap a vignette and on it, and it's like, oh, it looks tolerable. It looks better now. And that's what I usually do. Another thing that I would do to quote unquote elevate this art piece is I play around with the hue and saturation, because sometimes I would unintentionally make my art piece way less saturated, like it's so desaturated that I don't realize it. So I put a hue and saturation layer over there, and I would usually pull it up or pull it down depending on what you're working on or what vibe you want to go for. For this case, maybe I'll pull it up, and you can also quickly just change the values, the hues of your piece in this bar. But right now, I'm not going to do anything with that. And actually, looking at the piece, I just realized it's actually a lot darker than I want it to be. So you can always slap another brightness and contrast layer on top. Just increase that brightness if you ever wanted to. And in post-production, sometimes you can also use your layer settings. And usually when I'm post-production, this is going off topic, but I would usually use a soft brush, because I just want it to look, I want it to be a subtle effect. And always, you can do whatever you want, but for this case, I wanted to like have the soft and quote unquote more of a cinematic quality content to it. So in post-production, you're not really restrained to just using adjustment layers. You can use your layer settings as well. So I would make a new layer, and let's say I want to make this city, the village down there, glow a little bit because the sun is hitting their roof. So I would go either soft light or hard light, and then I would go on a yellowish tint and just gloss over it. And that it pulls your attention towards the village more. There you go. Yay. And something I would usually do in post-production too is I make sure if I want something to glow. Like if I have a lamp in there, like the one in this one, like I have a obvious overhead light there, but I wasn't able to truly make it look like it was glowing before I put post. But then after in post, I was able to give it effect, because that's easier that way. Just slap a hard light, soft light over, or an overlay layer, and then make something look glowing. That's what I usually do too. In this case, maybe I want the tower to glow, or I want that red streak to glow, maybe. And so you can do it in the same layer, or you can do completely a new layer. And this one, I want it to be harsher, hard light. Go to this red one, click your brush, and blue. And then it glows now. Yay. Look at that. And oh my God, it's so glowing. Everything's a glow. So pretty, so sparkly, or whatever. Oh my God. Okay. But yeah, that's basically it. It's really simple, but if I turn it off and on, oh my God, I just realized how horrible it is without the pose. But yeah. It's also nice that if you can put it through post, because then if you turn it off and on, it's kind of like a reflection point of what you need to do next time when you render. You're like, okay, I tend to go to saturated. So whenever I render next time, I'll make note of how saturated my colors are. And maybe you're like, oh, I after putting it through post, I realized that my drawings are usually very, very low in contrast. I'll make sure to put more contrast while I'm rendering right now. So basically, it's not cheating. It's actually a really nice way for you to like self-reflect and improve on your drawing for what you want to do next time. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna change it to my regular window. Okay. So yeah, but basically at the end of the day, it's good to learn Photoshop. It's not, it doesn't mean that, oh my God, Photoshop is the best thing. You have to learn it, Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, and everything else is trash. No, that's not true. I know for sure that's not true because I know some of my friends who don't use Photoshop at all, but they're like actually freaking amazing. So, but it is good to note that Photoshop is still something that a lot of recruiters or employers are looking for. These are just 3 screenshots that I got from employers that are hiring, and usually they would put proficiency in Photoshop, skills in Photoshop, experience in Photoshop. They rarely would ever put Clip Studio or Procreate or Fire Alpaca or Medibang. They would rarely put that. They will usually put Photoshop along with other softwares, usually ZBrush or Maya, stuff like that. Especially if you're concept art, they probably want to see Maya or ZBrush in there. So yeah, just keep it in mind. You might want to know how to learn Photoshop because you will be working with people who probably use Photoshop. So it's good to know that software. But yeah, that's it. That's the presentation. It actually went a lot faster than I thought it would. And so yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And if after this you guys have like problems in troubleshooting and using Photoshop, or you're like confused, like, wait, this is what I want to do, but it doesn't give the option that I wanted to, feel free to just shoot me a question and I'll try my best to help you troubleshoot the issue. But yeah, does any of you guys have any questions? Yeah, the hue changes always throws me off. What the hue changes is also really nice when you're like, oh my God, I've been looking at this piece for so long, and then you just change the hue and then you end up liking the different hue and you're like, oh my God. But that's nice too. Oh, right, I didn't show you alpha lock. Let me do that. Oops. Okay, I'll show you. Okay, let me go to, okay, let's do this. Okay, I'll show you alpha lock and clipping mask because I just realized I haven't done it yet. Alpha lock is basically restraining your edit to the thing that's already in your layer. So I'll show you. So let's say I'm making this, I'm making a circle here. And there's 2 options going about this. So if you just wanna draw inside the circle, I'm gonna change my brush first. If you just wanna go about shading the circle, you can't do that in a new layer. So what happens is if you just create a new layer and you like, that's what happens. It goes out of the circle that you want to draw inside in. So 2 ways that you can do this with is first with a clipping mask, or 2 with the alpha lock that I will show you as well, or 3 with the masking option. So the first one is the clipping mask. Clipping mask is very simple. So all you have to do is take this layer of like the shaded, the lighting layer, and all you have to do is right click and say create clipping mask. And that will restrain your new layer to the layer below it. So this layer follows the layer below it only. And this is very nice. If you have the option to do this, keep doing clipping mask because it will help you just create another clipping mask in front maybe, and you have a shadow layer over here, and you can always just, it's very not destructive, and you can just like switch through and see where the mistake is lying if you make a mistake or anything. So that's the first option, is clipping mask. It's usually what I would go first, always whenever I'm drawing. But the issue why I can't use clipping mask is is because you can't really clip a layer on a clipped layer. So once that layer is clipped, that layer cannot have another clipped layer on top of it. So it's like you only have one shot at using a clipping mask on a layer, basically. And that's usually where alpha lock comes in. So basically, with alpha lock is, let's say you have my bad. You have a character, which I'm going to draw horribly on. You have a character, right? Yay. And then you create a clipping mask on it, and that mask will be the character's shirt. Okay, now that thing is clipped. Okay, but then if you create another clipping mask on top of it, and you only want to draw inside the shirt, you can't really do that because that layer is clipped on the character layer, not on the shirt layer. I'll just name it so you're not confused. Shirt. Oh, wait, no. Man. Shirt. And save pattern. You want to make a pattern on your shirt, but the pattern is not restricted to the shirt, it's restricted to the character only. So it goes beyond your shirt. What you can do is you can actually pick your shirt layer. You see this thing at the top where it's like a checkerboard? So click on the shirt layer, you click the checkerboard, and that will alpha lock the layer. And so when you draw on the same layer, it will only be inside that shirt. You see, it's not going out. It's magic. Oh my god. So yeah, that's one thing that you want to keep in mind. That's what I usually do in a big illustration is I usually like if I want to do a building, I do a building, then I clip and I make clipping masks for the elements inside the building, like a window, a door, and then I just render inside like the individual layers. I go on a door, I do an alpha lock, and I start rendering the door with the alpha lock on. That's one thing. Another thing is the masking layer. So essentially what a masking layer is, I explained it in the adjustment layer. It can work anywhere. Let's say you're like, maybe I don't want the shirt to be that long, but also at the same time, I don't want to just erase it, you know? So go at the bottom and beside the adjustment layers, there's this square with a black circle inside of it. You go on the layer that you want the masking to be in, and you click that masking layer, and then you can just simply chip away at it. And you're like, oh my gosh, he's wearing a crop top. But then you stare at it and you're like, oh, I actually don't like that he's wearing a crop top. You can just easily put it back. You never lose your artwork. It's a very non-destructive way of going through your illustration, if that makes sense. Okay. I'm gonna see if that makes sense or not. Yes. Okay. So does that answer your question on the alpha lock? Yes. Okay. I'm glad. Yeah, when I realized that masking layers exist, it blew my mind away and I was like, oh my gosh, this is magic. But yeah, definitely utilize clipping mask, alpha locks, and masks in general because it will go a very long way. It's always safer. It's always good to be safer than sorry that you just like delete it and you're like, oh frick, I could have just, used a masking and then put it back. Now I want it back, but I deleted it and stuff like that. Yeah. Any more questions? Or did I miss some stuff that maybe I did not go through that you guys want to ask? Yeah, that was one of my problems with when I learned alpha locks and clipping mask too. I was like, oh, why don't you just use a clipping mask? What's the use of alpha locks? But then I use a clipping mask and I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense why there's an alpha lock. So